You know, most gun owners talk about ATF like they're this faraway entity that just comes up with rules and regulations off the seats of their pants up in Washington, D.C., but it's never really going to affect you, the regular gun owner. But today I'm going to tell you 7 ways that you could end up on ATF's radar. And look, some of these things I've actually done myself in doing research for this video, and nobody wants that knock at their door. Now, I know that you guys have strong opinions about the ATF and the agency themselves, and I know that you'll leave your opinions down below after this video. I want to hear from y'all. I always do. And trust me, I have my own opinions about them as well, which is probably very similar to yours. But unfortunately, when you're into firearms, if you have an FFL or an SOT, sometimes you have to deal with them. And so these are just 7 ways that you can end up on the radar. Hopefully this will help you out. And keep in mind, these guys have a budget of like $1.5 billion per year. They have almost 5,100 agents and currently 34,000 open firearm cases, and they're looking to prosecute or recommended prosecution for like 15,583 people as we speak. So they may seem like they're far away and they're not really doing a whole lot, but these guys operate in every state. And again, I don't want that knock, and I'm sure you don't either. So let's go and talk about some of the ways that you can end up on ATF's radar and how to avoid it. Now, I told you guys that I've done things to end up on their radar before, and here's a really common one that you may not have ever thought of, and that's actually buying 2 handguns at the same time. I mean, sometimes I'll buy 2 for comparison with each other, or maybe those are the 2 that I need to finish out a sevens video, or any number of reasons. There might be a his and hers, firearm, and you want to buy them for you and your spouse. I have no idea, but buying 2 handguns is relatively common, but anytime you do that, your information is going to be handed off to ATF, and that's not at the discretion of your FFL. The FFL has to do that. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't even have to be the same day. If you buy 2 handguns within a 5-day period, that has to be reported to the ATF. There's also your border states, and so, what the ATF has found is that, cartels in Mexico like to use long guns, especially for crimes that they commit. Now, if you buy 2 or more long guns in one of the bordering states to Mexico, if they can accept the detachable mag, if they're over 22 caliber, and of course they're long rifles, then those will also be reported. So, I don't know if you have to really guess my opinion on this. I say it's none of their business, but at the same time, that is not something, that you should press your FFL against, or your local gun shop, because that's not like a choice they have. They actually have to report that. Again, if you buy 2 pistols within 5 days of each other, or if you buy 2 rifles at the same time on one of the bordering states of Mexico. Now, here's one thing that makes gun owners really despise the ATF, and that is their tendency to approve certain items in the industry and then go back on those said items 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 10 years later, and then say, hey, you're actually in possession of an illegal item and we want that item back, or you have to destroy that item. The most recent example I can think of are the force reset triggers. Over 100,000 of these things were sold because it doesn't change the function of the gun at all. One trigger pull, round comes out, release, boom, trigger pull, round comes out. It's basically just one function that you have to do. It's the same firearm, it's the same function. You're not changing anything internally with the gun. Yeah, it's really a disturbing trend that we've seen over the past, decade, especially your pistol braces, your FRTs, all of these things that they try to, or that they do approve initially and try to reclassify and just make up rules by the seat of their pants, and then their ability to enforce these rules. But fortunately, there's judges and there are good Second Amendment groups out there that will fight these things tooth and nail, and we've seen that firsthand with the pistol brace ban. We've also seen that with the FRTs. I think the National Association for Gun Rights, they stepped in to this thing. And so there's lawsuits in Texas, and I think it's either in Florida or I think it is Florida and Texas. I could be wrong there, but there are lawsuits against the ATF for their reclassification of the FRTs. And again, this is one of the things that makes the ATF so despised in our community. Now, one of the most common ways that you can end up on ATF's radar and get a knock at your door is by tracing. Now, I talked about the 7 most traced guns back to crimes in a video that I did a few weeks ago. And so you can check that out. But if you sell a firearm and that firearm ends up in the commission of a crime, then they will have to go through a certain process in order to trace that gun back. Now, the 4473 doesn't send all of that information whenever you fill it out, unless there is a delay and then more information is sent over. But like I said, just by doing a 4473, the make and model and all that is not sent over. And so let's say they find a gun, it's used in a crime, they run the serial number. So the first thing they have to do is contact the manufacturer. Where did the manufacturer sell this to? And then from there, they have to trace it down the line to the gun shop and then where the gun shop transferred it. And if that was to you, then of course you will have to answer some questions as to why you don't have that gun when you sold it and all of that. Now, there's a lot of states where there's no requirements for you to have a bill of sale when you sell a gun privately. But here's the catch. If you don't do a bill of sale, at least between you and the other party, it could complicate the process a little bit. Like I said, there's some states where you don't have to do that at all. There's other states where you have to go to an FFL and you have to do the transfer that way. But if you're in one of those states where you're not required, again, I just think it's a good idea to do a bill of sale. Hey, this is the date it was sold. This is who I sold it to. Back when I first started YouTube, when I was doing a lot of that in order to buy guns for reviews and all of that kind of stuff, you know, I would ask for their CWP. If they didn't have a CWP, I wouldn't sell to them, because the one thing you can't do is sell to a known felon. And so by having a CWP, I knew that, hey, this person was legit. And of course, you can skip all that too by, you know, selling to people that you know, good friends of yours or family or, somebody like that. But just know that if you sell a gun privately and it's used in the commission of a crime, you could get a knock at your door from the ATF. Another unfortunate way that you would have some interaction with the ATF or end up on their radar is from a wellness check. If you have an ex-spouse who is angry with you for whatever reason, you have a family member that just doesn't like you having guns, maybe you have a neighbor that sees you, carrying firearms into your home and they don't want you to have them. There are actually ATF hotlines. I believe there's actually an app that you can download, and members of the public or members of your own family can actually send anonymous tips to the ATF. Now, again, I'm not a lawyer and I'm not going to give you any kind of legal advice, but if this were to ever happen to you, probably the best thing you can do is talk to an attorney before you even speak to them. Okay, so you don't want to incriminate yourself, obviously, and if, there's going to be people who say, oh, well, if you don't have anything to hide, why wouldn't you talk to them? Well, let's just be honest. Again, anything you say could be used against you, and you could just unknowingly say something that tips them off or makes them uneasy or whatever. You don't even want to go down that rabbit hole. So if you find yourself in this situation again, it's probably best to just talk to an attorney and kind of go from there, because these things do happen, and from what I understand, they will follow up with these wellness checks just to see what's going on. So it's another common way that you'll find ATF on your front doorstep. Another way to end up with some unwanted presence from the ATF is actually gun shops selling guns that have been used in crimes. So the ATF did a study, and essentially their parameters were pretty simple. You have, if you've sold 25 guns that have been used in crimes within a year, traced back to crimes, then that time to crime and police lingo actually will make your gun shop fall into that category of the shops that sell the most guns to criminals. Now, again, we don't blame Chevy or Ford or whatever for selling vehicles that people then get into and use in drunk driving. So, nor would I blame gun shops unless they are legitimately, knowingly doing straw purchase and things like that. Then, of course, that's a huge problem. But unfortunately, people are going to try to subvert the law, and criminals are going to try to break that, even in a legal way. When I did this video talking about trace guns, most guns that are used in crimes are stolen, but a good percentage of those, 25, 26% roughly, are actually used through straw purchases. Now, these gun shops that are named are actually further scrutinized, and they have to send an additional quarterly paperwork to the ATF about the used guns that they actually sell. And so it's just a blame game in order to, try to, give some of these gun shops a bad name and all that kind of stuff. And some of your more popular ones are gun shops that you would obviously, think of, some of your more big box stores and stuff. But there's also a lot of smaller shops too that are put on this list. Like I said, there's 1,300 shops that are on this list. So yeah, like I said, I think it's just a blame game to make gun shops, certain gun shops, look bad, and that's not something I would participate in, and I'm not going to sit here and name those gun shops. I think it's just a way to smear the gun industry as a whole. And I know my local gun shop, if they ever see like somebody walk in with another person, and one person says, oh yeah, hey, they want this gun right here, and it looks like they're trying to do a straw purchase, they will deny them straight up. They've had people where you'll have, maybe 4 people in a car. One person comes in, they say, hey, I want 4 or 5 of these guns right here, and walk back out to the car, grab a bunch of money, and then come back in. And yes, sometimes it is that obvious, but other times it's not. So again, I don't believe in blaming gun shops for things that criminals are trying to do to subvert the law. Now, when I made that video talking about the 7 most traced guns back to crimes, yes, most of the guns are stolen, but like 25, 26% are actually done through straw purchases. And so every gun shop I've ever frequented or talked to, or people that work at these gun shops, take this stuff very seriously because, again, it's their livelihood that is on the line. So another way to get a visit from the ATF is simply by having an FFL, whether that's home-based or an actual business, a brick and mortar type of business. They can actually come in once a year and check up on you, and this can be at random. Now, talking with some of my buddies that have worked in this industry for a long time, it's a lot less often than that they actually come by, which is a good thing. But I suppose it depends on the shop as well, because there's also a database of guns. Basically, if you sell 25 guns that show up, or show up in crime scenes within a year, then you will actually be put on this list, same list that I was talking about before, which is basically a blame game for gun shops. But regardless, maybe you will get more interactions from ATF if you end up on that list. I'm not quite sure about that, but it could be another measurement that they use. And then, of course, you're going to have to send in quarterly reports that shows the used guns that were checked out, serial numbers, make, model. Something that just gives them another point of contact, just a little bit more information to go off of in case that gun is used in a crime. And the last reason you may get a visit from the ATF is they may just want to engage with you. They may want to see if you will engage with them, I guess is a better way to say it. But if you have a home-based FFL, they can still do a check on you once a year. And then, like I said, man, I mean, they just want to knock on your door and engage with you for whatever reason. You could be under investigation. Maybe you're not. Maybe they just want to see if you will give them information and talk to them. And at that point, I say never, 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 never talk to them without talking to an attorney or having your attorney speak for you. Because again, things that you say to them can be used against you. And I think that's the biggest thing is no consent for unlawful search and seizures. And don't put your foot in your mouth. Just simply not talking to them. That doesn't mean that you have to be straight up rude with them and tell them to get the F off your property and blah, blah, blah. That just simply means, hey, I don't want you here. I don't really want to talk to you. And you have the right to do that. Such a beautiful thing we have in this country. Now, that doesn't mean that they couldn't go get a warrant if they wanted to. They absolutely could. But yeah, speaking to an attorney, if you get any kind of knock or any kind of visit from the ATF, that's probably your best course of action. So there you go. There are 7 examples of when the ATF could knock on your door. You could get a visit from the ATF. Of course, I'd love to hear from you guys. Any of y'all that have had interactions with the ATF, voluntary or involuntary. Maybe some additional things that you want to put into the comments down below and have an open discussion on this. I'd love to hear from you guys. If you like what I do, consider subscribing. You could join us on Patreon or join the channel right here, gain access to some cool perks, and help support what we do. Big thanks. See you in the next one. And as always, hold them down.